So good morning, everyone. So today I think we wanted to understand everything about the BDD. So here is the agenda that we have for this 1 hour session. First, we'll try to understand why BDD is required and what is actually the BDD. And the next, we will try to understand. So I think this acceptance criteria is everybody already aware of, but we will try to know like why this is linked to the BDD and how it is important, and the acceptance scenarios, because this is the place where the actual BDD documentation comes into picture. So we'll understand that with examples as well, and the Gherkin keywords, because this is the language that we are going to use for to write all the BDD documentation. So that is the one of the topic. And once we are done with that, there is a slide which talks about the big picture, which contains BDD, ATDD, and TDD all in one slide, and we will easily understand how these all the three are interlinked to each other and how they are going to help us in terms of getting the working software in place. And after all this, then I would like to show, because once we see the theory, because it will only make us understand, but when we see the actual implementation, a live demo, which is end to end, starting from user story to the acceptance scenario, to the tool, and to the code. So everything we'll see, like for example, I'll quickly show right now. So we'll use this example. Okay, where's my browser? Okay, it is not. Okay, so we will use this example for the end-to-end demo, the Google search page. So starting from user story, and how do we write feature files, and how do we do the end-to-end testing of this particular functionality. That is when we will be able to understand the all the benefits of the BDD. So now let's go to the slide. Any questions here in terms of if I missed any of the topics that we want to cover in this session, or is this aligned to the expectations that we have?
This is good, Bhanu. We can get
Okay.
started. Yeah.
Yeah, it's good. Something I'll be asking some things in the end. If we don't cover that,
Sure,
you
sure.
can for now start with.
Okay. Okay. And so here, I'm sure all of us are very much familiar what we are seeing on this particular screen, because most of the time, like in our experience, we might have seen a lot of successful projects, a lot of projects which have been failed, or which are which could not meet the customer expectations. So when we look at some of the reasons why the projects fail, most of the times it is all about missing customer expectations, because customer expects something, and in the end what we deliver is not exactly what he wants. And this generally happens because of the various assumptions, various communication gaps, primarily the communication gaps. And prior to Agile, yes, we never used to have those many connects with the clients or business side to understand the requirements in detail. Mostly it used to happen in the early stages of the project, and maybe in the later stages. Even with the advent of Agile, we are still seeing those problems. Primarily the reason is when the communication is happening, so somewhere that communication is lost, like whatever I express from as a business partner or business person, so by the time it reaches the developer, it loses that essence. So in the end, it will result into like something which we develop which doesn't meet that the customer expectations. I'm sure most of you might have seen something, maybe not exactly what we are seeing, which is depicted in this picture, but I'm sure we are aligned to this particular problem statement. So anybody would like to share any specific problem that you have come across with respect to the communication gaps? Does this picture resonate with the problems that we have in the IT world?
Yes, Bhanu, I have a questions like
Yes.
if this like BDD, it's earlier it was being used like as a waterfall model and B model was there. So if that concept is BDD is from that sense or like because nowadays when the sprint starts and all when exactly on the sprint planning exactly everything
Mhm.
has to be pinpointed with the story points with the clarity and all. So.
Yes. No, see, coming to the BDD, it is nothing specific to the waterfall or agile. Anywhere this can be used. Maybe you can still park that question, and in the end, we can revisit this because it is not something which is specific to agile or specific to waterfall. But ideally, what is happening is with the BDD, we actually need a rapid iterations, and that rapid iterations is are very much possible in by being agile. So that is where agile along with the BDD is the best thing to happen. If it is only BDD and waterfall, it might still not work because you have that frequent connects with customers, users, business people in that particular traditional approach. But in the agile, we want, like if you look at one of the principles, we want business and the development team work close hand in hand on daily basis. So BDD takes exactly that particular point and try to build on it, like how we can use that communication between the business and the development team and everybody in the project team to get to that common shared understanding. So it is very much linked to when linked with the agile, it gives that great results. Okay. So in a nutshell, like let's quickly understand what is behavior driven development. So this is an approach. Now we have seen the problems in the previous slide. Now, how do we address those problems with the help of the BDD? So this is an approach which helps that communication. So between stakeholders and the project team members. So when I say here stakeholders, it's everybody who are aligned to that particular project or product. It could be the users, it could be the business partners, business owners, a product owner, development team, business analysts, testers, everybody. So there is a proper communication which needs to happen between all the stakeholders across all the roles by expressing the needs as a concrete examples. So this is in a way like what we are saying, we are trying to get some concrete examples for at the user story level. Let's, because we are in the agile world, let's use the agile language for the entire session. So when we are working on the user stories, we should have those concrete examples for each story. And that is when we have that concrete examples, these concrete examples are nothing but acceptance scenarios, like how the system should behave in that particular requirement for that particular user story. What is the system behavior which is happening, because that is something which we are documenting as a concrete example using the BDD. Because one of the main problem in the earlier slide was, though the communication was happening, it is still not everybody would understand what the other person is saying. Like business person might use most of the time the domain language because that is where he has more expertise, and the development team has uses the technical language because that is what is their expertise, and similarly the testers. So when people are using those different ways to express, there is always a possibility of some kind of communication gaps. Now here, when it comes to the BDD, we are trying to encourage the collaboration. Let me on. So we are trying to encourage collaboration across all the roles. And the purpose of that is build shared understanding. So this is the key for the BDD, because when we look at the shared understanding, everybody are on the same page, whether it's business, development team, testers. And this is where I would like to, again, I'm sure all of us might be aware of this three amigos concept in Agile. So when it comes to three amigos, there are these three perspectives in any product or project that we develop. One is business perspective, development perspective, and testing perspectives. And if all of these roles work in silos, definitely it leads to those various problems which we have seen in the previous slide. But when it comes to the BDD, we are trying to get all of them together, and we are encouraging the proper collaboration between them, and that is what is leading to the shared understanding. So the shared understanding is the key here. And by shared understanding, what we mean is we are able to produce the system documentation which can be checked against the system behavior. If you look at a user story, that particular requirement, what is system supposed to behave in that particular requirement. So we are going to discuss on that system behavior, the way system needs to work, and that is why we call this as a behavior driven development. So it is driven by how the system is going to behave, and that is what it will help us to understand a user story to a great extent. And once we have that documentation in place, all that we need to do is we need to work in rapid small iterations to increase the feedback. And this is where the agile comes into picture, because in traditionally which might not be possible, but by being agile, we already have that framework in place, we have the practices in place. We should be, once we have this documentation in place, we should be able to do that rapid small iterations, so that we have working software. Through that we will be able to get the feedback and deliver continuous value. So this is how the BDD is going to help a lot. But in a nutshell, it is all about getting together with respect to all the roles we have, and deliver and coming up with the proper system documentation. And in the coming slides, we will see how simple it is. It is not at all a complex thing. And it is not an overhead also, because people might think that, okay, when we are going with the new approach, or is it going to add some new tools or new meetings and all that? No, it is not at all anything new. It is just that we need to understand what this is and how to implement, and then the existing whatever process that we have, we should be able to use them and get the results. So we'll see all that. Any questions as of now on the behavior driven development and how we need to come to that documentation, we are going to see in the upcoming slides.
You answered my question about the documents. The last statement, I will wait for your upcoming slides.
Sure. And particularly one thing I liked here is the shared understanding, because when I was reading one of the book from Jeff Patton on user story mapping or user stories he has written. So he says, in general, most of us think that when we are sharing the requirements, because in the form of user stories, in the form of use cases, or whatever we call in our projects, we think it is a shared understanding. It is not, because when we are sharing requirements, every person will try to understand from their own perspective. So that is not a shared understanding. But if we can get all of them onto the same table, it might not be face to face, even it is whether it's remote or face to face, anything, but overall we need to get them to a common discussion. That is when that discussion, that conversation will lead to the shared understanding. And on this slide, I don't want to spend more time, and I'm sure all of us are already aware of what this acceptance criteria, because anytime whenever we are working on the user story, one of the the mandatory thing I would like to see for any user story is acceptance criteria. Because if acceptance criteria is not there, then it is again prone to lots of issues. Like for example, as a developer, how do I know whether I'm done with my user story? Similarly, for a product owner, how do I accept, like on what basis should I accept this user story because the developer has said it is done? So this acceptance criteria comes into play because it clearly says that what are those conditions which the product should meet when it comes to that particular requirement. So that is the all about the acceptance criteria. And to me, one of the problem that I see with the acceptance criteria is, though we have a clear acceptance criteria, sometimes it is very difficult to validate by just looking at the acceptance criteria. Because it says, yes, it clearly mentions, but it doesn't talk about all the scenarios. So when, as a developer, what are those different conditions I need to validate to make sure or to say that I have done the development? There might be little vague elements which comes in the acceptance criteria, and that gap we are going to address through the BDD. Because if this was very much sufficient, then BDD wouldn't have been come into picture. But along with the acceptance criteria, if we try to bring in the BDD, that is when it going to close all the communication gaps that we discussed so far, and which will pave the way for the better development. And this is the primary slide for us, because this is where we understand what is how do we actually go about the BDD documentation. So we have seen like what is BDD, how do we get that shared understanding by getting everybody together onto the same page, having that conversation. So when we are having that conversation between all the stakeholders, so we need to come up with that product or a documentation for a user story. So that is nothing but an acceptance scenario. So we have a user story, and now we have an acceptance criteria. Now let's, during the same discussion, we should try to arrive at the acceptance criteria. So the acceptance criteria is nothing but it is a formal description of the behavior. So it is the behavior of the product generally expressed in the usage scenario. So when we are trying to come up with that particular documentation, now since we discussed if everybody uses the domain languages of their own, it becomes difficult. So that is where the BDD documentation is being developed in a common language. So that common language here is nothing but the Gherkin keywords. So Gherkin can be considered as a language, and for that particular language, there are few keywords which you are seeing here. But for now, ignore all the other keywords. Just look at this given, when, then, and but. For a moment, let's think that these are the only keywords that we have. And these are the keywords which we are going to use to produce that common documentation. So assuming we are in the product backlog refinement, we are discussing a user story, that conversation is happening between development team, testers, business analyst, or the product owner and the users. And when we are trying to agree on the acceptance criteria, and that is when we will try to come up with all those examples, concrete examples or concrete scenarios in the form of given, when, then, and but. So whenever we make a scenario, first we need to understand what is the current state of that particular flow, of that particular example. So given what is the current condition, that is what we need to write. And once we have a current condition, let's say given user is already logged in, given user is on a so and so page, if it is a web interface, given user is has already done so and so, and when user 1 second. This power has come back. So I will just take a few seconds. I hope you're able to hear me. Hello.
Yes, Bhanu.
Yes, Bhanu.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah,
Okay.
we can hear you.
Okay. So given is all about that the precondition for that particular example, for that particular scenario, and when is describing an action, like what is user trying to do in that particular scenario. So it describes when user clicks on so and so button, when user enters so and so details, and then so and so thing. And once we have that action in place, then what is the outcome? So this is a very simple statement. It is not an elaborate statement. It just contains those given, when, then. And sometimes we add and, because when this and can be used everywhere. Given user is logged in and user is already on so and so page. Once. And can be used in everywhere, like when user is trying to enter his email ID, and then he is trying to enter on the login, or he's clicking on the login button. So and can be used everywhere. Similarly, then what is the outcome, what is the results which we are trying to view when that particular action is performed? Any questions here? So it is a very simple documentation that we look for in the form of given, when, then, and most of the times, at least in my usage, I have not seen much of but usage. But is something like which we try to use in for a negative scenario, like we want to see the results, but we don't want to see something else. So but is used in that particular context. But the 90% of the time we will end up using given, when, then, and the business, all the other stakeholders and everybody should definitely be aware of these 5 keywords.
So Bhanu,
Yes.
so with this given, when, then, or BDD acceptance scenarios you mentioned, do we still need to write stories, or we can simply develop a system or a product just using given, when, then stuff?
Correct. So definitely we need to have a user story, because the reason why we need this as an additional input, Raj, is if you look at the user story, what we are trying to get is that conversation between the different stakeholders. So user story is always required, because that is what will be the basic thing on top of that collaboration. Like when, as a product owner, when I come up to the to this meeting and describe, okay, this is the user story I have, then we will have a proper discussion, to and fro discussion happens, and everybody will try to understand that user story in detail. And then after the understanding, then we will come to this, because immediately, without even requirement, it is very difficult to go to the scenario level. It is like without discussing a requirement, we are trying to come up with some kind of examples which might not work according to me. So it is always better, and this is where that 3C approach, the card, conversation, and confirmation. So card is nothing but a user story description, and that conversation happens between all the parties. And when it during the confirmation phase, that is when we write acceptance criteria and the acceptance scenarios in the given, when, then. So that way it is a proper process which is in place, and which actually enables those interactions, because this given, when, then should happen in such a way, like as a product owner, when I am discussing a user story, and when I should not give all the scenarios upfront to the team. We should only get that shared understanding as part of that what is the user story is about. Then user should be able to, developer should be able to say that, okay, this is the condition I'm looking for. Okay, what happens? We will see some of the examples in the next slides. Like let me use this example. Now assuming we are in the backlog refinement session for this book reservation thing. So all this requirement is about reserving a books, so that the customer needs to pay certain amount and to read the books. So here assume we already have a user story description. Acceptance criteria is nothing but member should be able to reserve a book when the book is available in the library list. Now once we have all that conversation finished and everyone has that common understanding on this requirement, that is when we should move to the scenarios. Because then one of the developer might say that, okay, like example, he gives Andrew reserves a book and he's charged $1. Then product owner might say that, oh yes, this is a right scenario. Okay, let's go with that. Now some other developer will say that, okay, Andrew reserves 2 books, is charged 2, because this is their understanding. Now product owner might say that whether the user should be charged 2 or 3 or 1 only. So that is something as comes as a discussion. And some of the one another developer might say that, what if the Andrew books 10 books? So this is how the conversation should lead us, because then everybody in that all the roles will have common understanding. So this conversation should lead to those common scenarios, but this should not be the first trigger point, according to me. Does that help, Raj?
Yeah, yes, yes.
Bhanu, I have a couple of questions.
Yes.
Yeah. So what I was thinking is, let me go with the first basic question. So this BDD comes in due and starts whenever we start requirement gathering itself and flourishes, or it is something that after you gather the requirement in the initial high level requirement, then you sit and do it. Where does this come in? That's my first question.
Okay. So, see, to me, whenever we are discussing the first point where we discuss those user stories. So, if it is way
Hmm.
before, like if you look at discovery, discovery is happening, trying to gather the requirements, that phase, it would be not a good place to get on with the behavior driven development, because that is still too early. We are only looking at what we are going to develop, whether these are the requirements, whether these user stories or these features are prioritized or that ones. So that is much early. But when we are in the backlog refinement, this is the where I would say we should use the BDD, because all that we want in the backlog refinement is everyone, not just product owner, but the team should have complete understanding on that user story. Definitely before sprints itself, because we are trying to understand that user story. So when we are trying to do that backlog refinement is nothing but user story is being refined. And
Yeah.
that by default we already have everyone attending that backlog refinement. So that would be the best placeholder for me to get started with that, because if we invent other meetings, then it will only become overhead. And people might say that, okay, now we are giving them additional meetings, additional tasks and all that. So by using the current backlog refinement calls, we are not going to impact by any other extra things onto the development team, or even to the stakeholders, or even to the product owner. So to me, the backlog refinement is the place where, if you are discussing, like for example, in my case, most of the time the team discuss about the upcoming user stories in the backlog refinement. I'm sure in all of us it could be the same scenario. So that would be the better place to get started with that. And if you are having some very early discovery sessions, that can be done separately.
Okay. And in this defining the behavior of the system, should it be like the team itself or even the business should be defining this? Because if we actually see the system's behavior
Yes.
kind of it's like a cyclic process. They have a requirement, they want the system to behave in a separate way. If the system behaves in that specific way, then again the requirements evolve, right?
Yes,
It's like a loop where they
correct.
feed each other kind of thing. So if that is the case, we want to define our progress, or how we are going to build this thing, or even test this thing based on what behavior of the whole system we are defining.
Correct.
Should the business have a say in defining this scenarios or defining this
Yes.
acceptance criteria based on behavior, or like should it be the team only?
No.
Because if you are saying we do this after the initial requirement gathering during the refinement, it may not be always a chance to get that uh, privilege, right, of having
Yes.
different
I, I
business stakeholders coming in.
I agree. Agree. So to your question, do we should we involve business? To me, yes, that is the best thing that should happen to get the right BDD, because only when the business involved, we will be able to get all the requirements. But and also the other point is also very much valid, because it is a loops. We will not be able to come up with all scenarios in one go. Even though you are in a backlog refinement today, now is it possible to come up with all the scenarios? Definitely not. But idea is, do we have that common understanding at this point in time, and later while developing, if there are any other scenarios coming up, the development team should go back and share those additional scenarios, and similarly it could be the users or business guys. So this is a continuous exercise, but we should have that starting point during the backlog refinement session. And if you have some other meetings where you have the business, I think that can also be done. My only point is, when you already have the backlog refinements, let use them. So instead of adding any new meetings. But if if business is not able to join those backlog refinements, then we need separate sessions with them. I think that can always be done.
Yeah, maybe this point I am raising might be a little going out of the topic, but the major concern here, what I was thinking of is, consider involving business multiple times, because we feel that there will be a multiple handover of the thing, right? So,
Correct.
involving business in such cases when development has not started, if we go back multiple times, then in
Yes.
real life, many of you would have seen that they do keep changing the requirement. If you
Correct.
suggest them a scenario, they will say, "Ki, हाँ, add this also, add that also." Earlier, when we do not involve them basically in the refinement, because refinement is business has given, you do it among your team so that it is in a developable state. So
Yes.
when we were going to with that approach, we can always say, even whether they find a new scenario or we find a new scenario, we can always go back and tell them that, see, we are doing this as an iteration. So whatever you were suggesting comes next. So
Correct.
that does give us a benefit that we restrict our requirement intake to an extent that we
Yes.
do not go for an ever changing requirement. It will change, we will go in the next sprint, or maybe we will figure it out, prioritize depending on how much you need. Because when you go back to the, consider we are going for this BDD, right? The
Yes.
moment we give them this chance to enter our refinement, I like I think it will be a difficult task to do. So that is why I asked where to get them involved. So if you are
Yes.
suggesting refinement, how to tackle those situations, like if you have done, if you have faced anything, because I'm going to kind of propose this to my project managers and all, so I'm just looking at multiple options. These are questions I had in mind, so maybe I'm putting little extra burden on everyone. But
No.
if you can guide me on that.
Yeah. See, to me, because we already have those sessions in planned, the backlog refinement sessions, we should invite additional invitees should be those business guys and customers. And you whichever framework you use, particularly I like what we see in the less framework. And because less framework also suggests exactly the same in all the backlog refinements, make sure your actual customers are also, if possible, get them onto this particular call, because every framework talks about this customer centricity. Now, if customers are only used maybe in the early stages or maybe here and there, we will never lead to that customer centric products. And that is only possible if you want to develop right products which are customer friendly, then get them onto your discussions. So your backlog refinement sessions, to me, it is not just the team or product owner. Uh, it should be the business guys, so that we have that conversation between all the stakeholders, and everybody will try to understand, have that empathy. Like business will have an empathy on the development team. Similarly, everybody will have on the other side. So to me, that is the right stage, because this is a continuous event. As you said, it is a continuous loop. Now, what other meetings are we going to have which are in that particular nature? So since these are almost scheduled every week, once in a week or once in 2 weeks, so this is the right platform for me. And but yes, is it possible to get business to every meeting? Might not be, no. But if they can join at least once in a month or twice in a month, I think that is the thing that we should go for.
One thing
Okay.
to uh, one thing to add here, Bhanu and Sastik, from my experience, and what Bhanu said is absolutely right. Like this refinement meetings are essential where we can bring in the stakeholders. But the key is preparation for this refinement meeting.
Yes.
So what I've seen is what people try to do, they start writing the scenarios in that meeting. Then people will start saying, okay, like it will be a waste of time for people who are attending in that meeting. So what the suggestion or the best practice that I have seen people doing is they create those information to 60 to 70%,
Yes.
whatever,
Correct.
before that meeting. Then only this meetings, refinement meetings, people will see, okay, what is left out. They will have a shared understanding in this refinement meetings, and whatever is left out, they give a feedback so that it can be taken outside that meeting. So never try to start writing all of this inside the meeting, because that would be a limited 1 hour or 1.5 hour meeting, and we want the best use of that time. So this is the best practice that I would like to share.
Yeah, and Raj, one another request. In the interest of time, let's park the questions because
Yeah.
I have a hard stop at 11.
Yeah,
So,
sorry.
Yeah.
no, we will. I think it's good to have the conversation just because of the hard stop. We'll go through this
Yeah.
because that demo I want to cover here. So before that demo, this is the big picture that we have, like how BDD, ATDD, and TDD are interlinked. Like overall, the complete scenario that we discussed, we are
Bhanu,
trying to create a user story, and that is when we, after having during that conversation on the user story, we are going to define scenarios. So this is the place where we are trying to get that BDD documentation in place. Now, once we have those scenarios, for each of the scenario, we are going to do the ATDD, automated test driven development. So we are going to start creating a failing acceptance test and make that test pass so that the entire scenario is successfully developed. And when you are developing each of those scenario, now to develop one scenario, we might end up creating n number of components. So for each of those components that we are developing, we should also look at the TDD aspect, test-driven development. So test-driven development is nothing but like red-green refactor. So we start with the failing test case. This is at unit test level. This is at the scenario level. So we will start with the unit test case, and then naturally, when we start with the failing test case, it will not run because we have not implemented the code. And then we will try to do that implementation and make the test pass. And once the test is passed, we will try to refactor. So if we need more discussion, we can definitely spend more time on this TDD ATD aspect. But let me do a quick demo on this ATD, BDD, and ATDD thing, so that we understand how we can do an end-to-end using the BDD approach, like starting from story, and finally we have the demonstrating working software. So, and then we can go to the questions if there are any. But if we need more discussion on this slide, again, I am okay. But I just want to quickly do that demo. So
Sure,
we will
sure.
try to use the demo on this particular user story, the Google search we all might be using on daily basis. So whenever we type something, whatever we want to search, we will want to see those search results, right? So here is the user story I have for that functionality. As a user, I want to be able to search, enter search criteria in the search field so that I
Bhanu,
can find, yeah,
can you go to slideshow mode, please?
slideshow. Okay.
It's too small. Yeah, yeah. Thank you.
Okay, so as a user, you are able to see that user story. Now, when it comes to the BDD, now this is what we have. The scenario is this is the keyword again, scenario, which describes what is the scenario about. This is a search functionality, and given when then given user is on this Google page, when user enters search criteria in the search field and he clicks on search button, then user should be able to see the list of features and the search result should be relevant to search criteria, but user should not be able to see irrelevant results. So now assume we have a user story in place, we have the backlog refinement is being done, and as part of that, we are able to come up with this given then when then up documentation in place. Now, most of us think that, okay, this is the end for BDD. And initially, when I was understanding the BDD, I too thought the same. But this is actually the beginning. The best part is yet to come. That is when we will see the demo. Uh, because by just getting this, are we going to solve all the problems that we discussed initially on the first slide? To certain extent, yes, no. But when we start implementing using this search functionality, that is when we will realize the greatness of this BDD. Let me now move to the tool. So all that, it is very simple. Now, don't look at it even if you are non-technical, it is still easy to understand. So we have seen the given when then criteria for that particular user stories. All that I have done, just copied that particular given when then into this file. So what you are seeing here, this is again another keyword in the gherkin, which like every feature that we developed, we can it might contain n number of user stories, right? So I have this feature which is Google search. Now, if I have 100 scenarios, I will try to put all those 100 scenarios in this particular file, so that this one feature file is relevant to all the Google search functionality. So right now, I'll just comment the second scenario. So what you are seeing is this scenario on the slide, and I just copied into this feature file. So which I named it as a search functionality feature. So that is the first step. It is just a copy paste kind of thing here when we are doing the creating the feature file. And the next step that we need to do for the implementation is to run this particular scenario, we need to have an acceptance test. Not the actual implementation, but it's an acceptance test case. So that is also very simple because the tool is going to provide us a ready-made code for that. So for now, I will show you that also, but quickly, this is the code that we have. So inside, I have few lines implemented because I want to do the demo. But for now, these are the methods. What you see here has been given by the tool itself. So given user is on the Google page, when I just added a few additional like code here, because so that we can completely integrate the Google search, like opening the google.com and entering that whatever the search criteria that we have. So let me run now. All that we want, we should have is feature file and this acceptance test. The code, we will automatically get it from the tool itself. And what happens if I run this? I'm just running, and this is where I'm using the Cucumber tool, because Cucumber understands the gherkin keywords. And this is where the complete automation also comes into picture. The system is little slow. It will take a few additional seconds. This is my kid's laptop. Generally, I do all this in my office laptop only. Okay, so it is now
Wow.
trying to that scenario, which is search functionality.
One quick question, Bhanu. Like, cucumber is a necessity for this BDD
We'll
implementation?
come to that. We'll come to that. So now it has searched the BDD, which we have provided as an input, and I can automatically close that also using the tool, but which I have not done. So all that it has done is it has picked this BDD of, as a keyword, and it searched, and then the results, and finally it should also match according to whether it is relevant or not. All that is part of this acceptance test. So this is how we can have the complete automation in place using the BDD. And we have time so that I can, okay, we have 5 minutes. So let's take now one another thing I want to show here. Now, when we have this feature file, right now, what I've done, I've just run this particular thing, right? So if I uncomment this and run, this will not only run this particular scenario, it will also run another scenario. And here, instead of passing the fields inline, like here BDD is directly passed as an inline text. Sometimes we want to pass different keywords, right? So there I'm trying to use this examples as a keyword and then send like TTD as one thing, TDD as another time. So this scenario will be run now twice. So this is one scenario. Now this itself is like two scenarios. Like first time it will go through all the steps using this TDD. Second time it will again go through all the steps using the ATDD. And do we need to run each feature file at one time? Definitely not, because all that if you look at this code, this particular runner, there is hardly any logic that we have here. All what I am doing is I'm trying to use this cucumber tags itself for this particular test runner, so that what it will do is it will run all the feature files. Like for example, if I have 100 features, it will run all those 100 features also and produce a report, which we can see here, bdd report.html. We can give any name here. So the beauty of this is, assume at the end of the sprint, we want to know where we stand, the team stands. So if you just look at this particular report, it will give all the user stories which were in the sprint, how many of them were passed, how many of them failed, how many of them like where did it fail. All those details will be available. And similarly, if you are assuming you are trying to deploy your into the production, just before that, if you run this particular test runner, you will see if the application is actually behaving as it's supposed to. So if there is any error, we can quickly go and resolve that before even we deploy. So that way we can avoid those bugs which can come in after deployment. So that way this is very user friendly and it will solve multiple problems according to me, because it becomes easier as well. Okay, now if you want to see how this like for example feature file, what we can, any questions here, or should we maybe right now it is, I'm just looking at my time box, so another 2 minutes. I thought I'll also do a quick building of this feature and this step decision. I will show you maybe quick 2 minutes. So I'll just use the other example that we had in the, so let's assume we are trying to develop this book reservation thing. So if a development team, what they would do, they'll copy the scenario that we have, go to the tool, and first step is about creating a file. And the extension should be dot feature. That is when the cucumber will recognize. So I'm just creating this reservation dot feature, and it will give all the, I'm just removing this, all the dummy code which it has given, delete, and I'm copying from what we had. Before that, so let me save. So we have, for the first step is we need to create a feature file, which we have done. Now it's showing some error saying that there is an acceptance test missing, or the what is we call it as step definition file. So we don't have the step definition file for this particular code to run because we haven't done anything. So first step is feature file, and that step definition file is also called as a glue code. So for every scenario that we have, we should also have a step definition file. That is when we will be able to run. So to create that, what I will do, I'll just run this as a Cucumber feature. So what it has done, it says one scenario was there and one is undefined. And because first itself is undefined, it has skipped the next two scenarios. But the good thing what you see here is you can implement these steps with the steps below. All that I would do is copy this, and then now I'm creating, because I'm using the Java code. So it has created this code. I'm just copying whatever the tool has provided here. And I'm just removing this additional not required. So with this, what we have is we have a feature file in place, and we also have our step definition file, which is nothing but an acceptance test case or the glue code here. So if I run this, it should remove the errors because we have implemented. Let me try. Okay, so there is some error here. Okay, so I forgot to implement this. Let me import this. Because the errors were there in this, so it didn't run. I don't need all this. Okay, so the errors are gone. All that I need to do is, because these methods, what it has used, there is a Cucumber package which we need to import. So because I've imported this package, the errors are gone. So now if you see here, the errors are not appearing on the feature file. And if I run now, and it is successfully saying that one scenario which is passed. And similarly, now I want to show this test runner also, how the report looks like, or I've already run it, so I'll just show the report in the interest of time. Bandwidth. So this is showing 1 hour ago because we didn't run just now. Before the session, that's the time I've run this test runner. So it says that time there was only one scenario. So it is giving that, okay, which feature was that we ran and which scenarios got executed. So all that will be visible here. So at the end of the sprint, just imagine we run this particular test runner, or as a product owner, or as a scrum master, or as a team member also, we will see that how many of our features or how many of the scenarios got run and which are failing. All those details will be quickly visible here, and it is very much readable. Everyone will be able to understand with this. Okay, so yeah, that's the quick demo that we have. But if any additional things, we will be able to do that when we meet next time. Yeah, this is what I had.
Sure, Vano. Thanks. I think it was really helpful. Um, but maybe I think I'll connect with you for a couple of inputs on how we can suggest this. Go ahead. And is this Cucumber integration with Eclipse and that is a necessity? What I was
Yeah.
asking.
So there are multiple tools. So Cucumber is one thing which goes very well with the Eclipse that I've used, because on top of Eclipse, all that I need to do is add that Cucumber installation and it works. So there are multiple tools available. Cucumber is one. The SpecFlow, if you are using .NET and CRs, maybe the better one would be SpecFlow. SPECFLOW, and there are other tools like JBehave, which is also, but out of all these things, Cucumber and SpecFlow, these are the most popular ones. For Java guys, I would recommend the Cucumber as a tool, because that is when the Cucumber tool understands. And there is also one another like online plugins also, like Tidy Gherkin. Like for example, I've just copied from whatever the code that it has given, right? If you want to see the same code, go to that particular Tidy Gherkin plugin, just add to that your Chrome or Edge browser, and you just copy and paste the scenario. It will give that step definition file. So we just need to copy from there and create our acceptance tests. So for development team also, it is not an overhead, not an additional thing that we are asking them, because all these things we have seen in a quick time, we will be able to create this feature file in a quick time. We are not like manually coding all this information. So everything is ready made. So we'll be able, and implementation anyway, the team has to do that. So it is just that we need to connect to that implementation, to that acceptance test. We have complete automation in place. In fact, I would say like most of the teams, if they are able to say we have all like in sprint automation by end of the team sprint, and which will resolve multiple issues. Like say for example, we have even regression tests. Like we have worked on so and so features during the last time, but now whatever we have in the current sprint, that might have reopened some or resulted into some of the bugs in the previous features. So all that can be easily found by running these feature files. So at any time, and the biggest thing to me, I would make the bold statement is like, we are using currently the UAT phase for all the projects, right? So I would say if we can do the BDD in a right way, like as Swastik mentioned, if we can involve users, customers in a right time and get those BDD documented continuously, then probably we don't need that UAT phase at all, because we are able to get the scenarios identified for that, and all those are getting executed here. Why do we need another phase? So just imagine what could be the cost savings if we can reach that stage.